In the winter of 1968-69, a Gloucester Museum team directed by Henry Hurst undertook an archaeological excavation on the site of the Bell Hotel in Southgate Street, Gloucester. After removing foundations, 3 metres down below medieval levels, they exposed the southeast corner of the Roman Forum, including part of the courtyard. In the courtyard, a foundation of limestone blocks was uncovered, the base of a Roman statue. With it were fragments of bronze that were identified as part of this statue. The most significant fragment was part of one of the fringe blankets that Roman riders used in place of a saddle. So the Forum statue was shown to be an equestrian one, like this of Marcus Aurelius in Rome. In 1997, Gloucester celebrated the 1900th anniversary of its civilian foundation, when the redundant fortress was re-established as a colonia, a chartered town for retired soldiers. This is how it looked in the 2nd century, with the Forum at its centre. Gloucester Civic Trust decided to mark the anniversary by erecting, near the site of the original statue, a new one of Marcus Cocceius Nerva, the honest and tolerant emperor in whose reign, AD 96 to 98, the colonia was founded. It was agreed that it should be a modern interpretation of a classical equestrian statue in bronze, and a 5th scale maquette was requested from renowned sculptor Anthony Stones. The Nerva statue would be Gloucester Civic Trust's Millennium project. Fundraising began with a large gift to the Trust by the late Peter Price, a former honorary secretary. A similar major donation was made by the Summerfield Charitable Trust. There were additional contributions from many private individuals, charities, local companies, and from Gloucester City Council. Early in 2001, Gloucester Civic Trust asked the City Council to commission the sculpture on its behalf. Anthony Stones modelled the full-size statue in clay at his studios near Oxford. Moulds were then produced from this pattern by Pangolin Editions, and statue parts cast and assembled at their foundry at Chalford. As the statue's plinth was to be hollow, the Trust decided to put a stainless steel time capsule under it. Early in 2002, this capsule was loaded with items relating to the Nerva project, to life in the city at the millennium, as well as goodwill messages. It was then sealed and filled with protecting gas. Meanwhile, the plinth for the statue was being cast by Barnwood Construction, who provided it as their generous contribution to the project. Gloucester City Council laid the foundation. The plinth was delivered to the Southgate Street site and installed over the time capsule on Sunday the 16th of June. The following Sunday, the statue was brought from the foundry. It was welcomed by a large crowd that included the sculptor, Gloucester Civic Trust members, and a full civic party of Mayor, Councillor Pam Tracy, Sheriff, Councillor Paul James, and their consorts.
The plaques aren't on yet because they've got to render the plinth.
The plaques fitted to the statue plinth were kindly paid for by the management company of Eastgate Shopping, the shopping centre adjoining the statue in Southgate Street. They were cast by DM Foundry at Thrupp. The unveiling ceremony for Gloucester Civic Trust's Nerva's statue finally took place on Saturday the 23rd of October 2002. 5 years after the celebration of the founding of Colonia Nerviana Glavensis, 3 years from the project's start, from the Guildhall Arts Centre, just before noon, the Ermine Street Guard led a procession that included the Civic Party, the Chairman of the Trust Robin Morris, Sculptor Anthony Stones, and Henry Hurst, director of the 1968 excavations, escorting Alison Wooley, who was to perform the unveiling.
Fellow citizens of Gloucester and fellow members of the Gloucester Civic Trust, we're very glad to welcome you here today for what is a very auspicious occasion for the Gloucester Civic Trust. Very briefly, the Civic Trust was formed about 30 years ago in an effort to preserve the historic fabric of the city of Gloucester and also to provide educational facilities in the form of tourist guides and tourist information services. We also have a planning appraisal group which liaises with the city over planning matters. A number of our members sadly are not here this morning because one of our very prominent members, Brian Tate, who was chairman of the trust in the late 70s, unfortunately died comparatively recently, and it's his memorial service today. And I wanted to pay public tribute to Brian as one of the founder members of the trust, who did an awful lot for the city, and in particular was one of the guiding lights in the docks committee in the early days when the docks and the North Warehouse were being considered by the city. So we have a thought for Brian today. On an occasion like this, I, as Civic Trust Chairman, want to make one or two personal thank yous to a number of people. Primarily, I'd like to thank my wife, who's here somewhere this morning, and who supports me on a number of these very difficult things that we've had to do over the years. I also would like to thank a particularly active number of people in the Civic Trust. I know it is wrong perhaps to name names on occasion like this, but Tony Alt and Nigel Spry have really been the people who have got this project off the ground, and they've worked extremely hard to give us this statue this morning, along of course with all the other members of the Civic Trust who are entirely volunteers. The other people who have given us a lot of support and encouragement on this project have been the citizens, and I'm hoping that a couple of their members are here this morning. John Lovell, who's a Civic Trust member, and Hugh Worsnip, who's one of their reporters, who consistently encourages the Trust in its various activities. Now, my job today really is only to introduce the Mayor to you, who's going to take over the proceedings from now on, but I would like to thank you all for coming this morning and showing such interest in our latest project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to, and before I do the speech for the unveiling, I must say we're very blessed with the weather today. And isn't it wonderful, everyone, to see the sun shining on that great man there who brought our city here? Well done. Okay. I'm delighted to be here today to celebrate the unveiling of a wonderful statue representing an important figure in Gloucester's history. It is already a major landmark in the city and one which we can all be proud of. Many will know the history behind this statue much better than I ever will. But I do know that Nerva was the emperor after whom the Roman colony in what we now know as Gloucester was named. And the sitting of this new statue is very close to the original position of the statue fragments of which were found when the Barrow Tower was excavated in 1968 under the direction of the city archaeologist Henry Hurst, who is with us today. Thank you. Statues in this city sometimes have tendency to be a little constructive, but the statue of Emperor Nerva is the exception to the rule. Almost everyone in the city and our many visitors simply admire the fine work that it is with no hint of criticism at all. This is a great tribute to the work of the sculptor Anthony Stone and the Gloucester Civic Trust, who were the driving force behind the project. I congratulate you all on your achievements. Once more, this statue was founded largely by private donations, with only a relatively modern level of finance support from the City Council. Fundraising for this project hasn't always been easy, but the members of the Civic Trust have shown tremendous determination to reach their targets. Well done. We are very grateful to the late Peter Price for his very generous donation towards this project. And I am delighted to welcome here today Peter Price's niece, Alison Wooley. Welcome. We are also deeply indebted to the Summerfield trustees, without whose generous support this project would not have been possible. Thank you. As one of these very generous donations, there were dozens of individual contributors from the people across the city. Other contributions came from the local business, including Barwood Construction, who donated the plinth, which the statue is standing on, and the Eastgate Shopping Centre, which sponsored the information plaque. Thank you. This shows that the people in Gloucester care about their heritage, and I'm sure this wouldn't be the last example of the community coming together to promote our history in this wonderful city of Gloucester. This is a very proud day for the city of Gloucester, and I have great pleasure in asking Henry to say a few words and invite Alison to unveil the plaque. Thank you all very much for coming along. God bless you all. Thank you.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a wonderful day, and... Sorry, I've just turned myself off. Wonderful day, and this is a wonderful thing to celebrate. I think it's absolutely stunning. Now, I've been asked to try and set the scene a little bit, so let us just take ourselves back to Roman times. And funnily enough, with this, well, not just with the statue here, but with all of us around, it's much easier than it normally is, because we're standing just outside what was the civic square of Roman Gloucester. And it was a big square, it went right across Southgate Street, and more or less where the trading company is was the Basilica, which was a great big hall, about the size of the cathedral nave, a colonnaded building like that, and in front of this was this great courtyard. And the original of this statue, which we were lucky to find all those years ago, or the model for it, was sort of over on that side, sort of as we look up towards the cross, over on the right-hand side. So today, with all of us gathered around, we have rather a Roman scene, a bunch of people standing around the statue. Let's imagine that I'm some dodgy Roman politician or something like that. There you go. So I think it's a wonderful addition to Gloucester. Now, the other thing I've been asked to explain for the curious is the name of the guy, Marcus Cocceius Nerva. Nigel Spry said to me, do say about the name. So Roman names work like this. You had 3 names if you were a Roman citizen. A lot of people in the Roman Empire weren't Roman citizens. The Roman citizens were the guys who paid less tax, had the privileges, and so on. So Marcus is the first name, Cocceius is the surname, the family name, like Smith or whatever it is, and Nerva is what's called a cognomen, an additional name, which distinguishes that branch of Smiths from other branches of Smiths. It goes with the surname. So there he is, and he was a distinguished senator. He became the emperor in his 60s and did a good job, as the rather nice inscription there says. So that's Nerva, that's Roman Gloucester. Now, what I rather hope, Madam Mayor, is that the city will get into the habit of setting up statues. Because I've got a suggestion for another statue, maybe not an equestrian statue given the person concerned, and this is one to Peter Price, who's, as the Mayor has said, his money very substantially financed this project, but in other ways he was a wonderful benefactor to Gloucester. He was one of the founder members of the Civic Trust, about which you've heard, and before that he was a leading light in the civic design group. And I think if today we're all very conscious of the city and making it more beautiful and thinking about it, this wasn't particularly the case so strongly 30, 35 years ago. And Peter was one of the pioneers. I mean, there were many other people too. So one day, who knows, it would be very nice to remember him and his distinguished family. Now, failing Peter himself being here, and I kind of feel he is in spirit, and I know he was present as that delightful procession walked along Eastgate Street and down Southgate Street. Peter would have loved that. Failing Peter himself, we do the next very best thing, which is to invite his niece Alison to unveil the plaque opening the statue. So Alison, over to you.
Found some roughly to do is that we go on the latest rules and decide that anything's proved wrong, dated. Obviously there's this should follow through. Yeah, they've been going, the weight behind it here, this penetrates through, also bends. Yeah, oh yes, that's it. Did you try that? Well, across the middle, like all the other inscriptions. What are they doing with it? It fits in to what's already here. It wasn't planned to go here, but it fits in very well. It's showing the scars. That's right.
Well, that man's going to garden the park.
The Ermine Street Guard escorted the unveiling party and an enlarged procession back from Southgate Street to the Guildhall Arts Centre. Here, the City Council and the Trust hosted a reception to show appreciation of those who had made the most important financial and practical contributions to the project, including the time capsule.
like this, we ought to make a small floral dedication to the three civic ladies and Alison. So if the civic ladies would like to come forward, we've got the lady mayor here.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay.
Where's Alison?
Alison, where are you?
Where's your lady mayor?
Where's Sally?
They're determined to embarrass you.
We'd like to thank the ladies for helping us out today and presiding over the affairs and making it such a worthwhile event. So could we just record our thanks in the usual way by giving them a... Not one of the ladies, but no doubt we'll find her eventually.
Yeah. May I just say again, it's been a privilege this morning as mayor. I'm the 522nd mayor of this city, and it's a great pleasure to be here on the unveiling of the statue era. I was here, how long ago was it? Well, how long was it? About a month ago, 2 months ago, when we saw the statue arriving? 2 months, March. Yeah, 2 months. So we thought it was only going to be about an hour, and they're about 5 hours. And I thought this year, we had the trouble now, is the gave the trouble years ago getting this city up and running, you know. But he's a great guy, and I think we were blessed with that sun coming out on it today. But anyhow, we were talking earlier on too that this city is a city for statues, and this city is more historic, I think, in what the cities they talk about, York and London or more, but it's up to us to do something about it. We all talk, we're all talking, we all say, yeah, wouldn't it be nice? But nobody, excuse my phrase, don't get off their asses and do anything about it. And, you know, we were just talking earlier about St Nicholas's Church. The church is going free, and I think we just got to get some toilet facilities in there. But with the pressure and petitions and canvassing, we can do it. We've got to get this city back on the map. And it's like you said, wasn't it, earlier on, I'll get your name again, about what time, just your little idea about the church there.
Well, I went to Salisbury a little while ago, and I was so annoyed that they do the Salisbury story so well. Admittedly, they have got a distinguished history, but of course we've got an even more distinguished history. If you go to York, you find they do a marvellous job there. And they based the York story inside an ancient church. St Nicholas is redundant. This is an opportunity to bring a new use back to an old building. Wouldn't it be marvellous to be able to tell the Gloucester story, which spans 2,000 years, literally from the Stone Age to the Space Age? And I think if there was a will within the city, from the top to the bottom, it could be done.
About another sculpture, isn't that right? Would you like to look? Well, the gentleman's up there. Do you all know who this gentleman is here?
Massey, is it?
That's right.
How about Colonel Massey?
Absolutely. Do you want to say a few words on that while I got you here, so we can record it all?
Where is he?
There he is.
In 1992, I was asked by Gloucester to research Colonel Massey with a view to doing a statue, but it never happened. But I did a lot of research, and it was most interesting. He was a very courageous young man and saved Gloucester from the Royal Armies. But the interesting thing about him is that his face is still with us. The famous film actor, who you remember as the old doctor in Dr. Kildare, Roman Massey, is a direct descendant, and his son Daniel, and they actually look like Colonel Massey. So there wouldn't be any problem in getting a model, or getting the likeness of him. And there is also a full-length painting of him in Ottawa, Canada, by Peter Lely, which was done at the time. And the reason it's in Canada is because Daniel Massey was the great Prime Minister of Canada, and a direct descendant too of Massey. So there's strong, powerful DNA in that family. And I can imagine him, swaggering young man with his sort of semi-cavalier outfit somewhere in the centre of the town, presiding over things. So I think he'd make a marvellous addition to the town.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.
In the afternoon, the reception was followed in the old Guildhall Assembly Room by an illustrated talk on early Roman Gloucester by Henry Hurst. He was introduced by the chairman of the Trust, Robin Morris.
Good afternoon again, everybody. Lady Mayor, City Sheriff, and fellow members of Civic Trust, and ladies and gentlemen. Wasn't it very successful this morning? And I'm sure this afternoon is going to be just as pleasurable for you all. And we have, of course, doesn't really need any introduction, I know, but I've got to sort of earn my party piece, I suppose. And we have got Henry Hurst this afternoon, and Henry was, of course, officiating this morning. I am told, it's a bit before my time, that Henry came to Gloucester in the late 60s, 1967, where he was the archaeological field officer. I suppose our main contact with Henry, of course, was the leading role he took in such organisations as GADARG, representatives of which are here this afternoon, and Gloucester Civic Trust, in the days when Peter Price and David Payton and one or two others were trying to get the Civic Trust off the ground. Henry then moved on, I think, to the excavation unit, and has gone on to greater things since. He's now a reader in classics archaeology in Cambridge, and I understand that his principal claim to fame nowadays is the extensive work he's done on the excavations at Chalford. So that little bit of a build-up, I'm sure we're in for a very good talk this afternoon. And without further ado, I introduce yet again Henry Hurst.
Thank you very much indeed, Robin. One thing I must take no credit for GADARG, which has been a vibrant and vigorous organisation which I've attended as a participant, but not a leading role. I haven't had. Others have done that. Some years ago, thinking of the 2:30 slot, I had to give a talk to the Cotswold Naturalist Field Society, and the Cotswold Naturalists are a delightful bunch, possibly some of you. Are any of you Cotswold Naturalists? Hands up? No. Anyway, quite a few sort of middle-aged people, and the meeting was in a small, stuffy room in the back of Cheltenham Museum. And as I'm about to do now, we turned the lights off and I showed the first slide, and there was an old gent in the front who immediately started going, and everybody else who'd come for the pleasant sort of, digestion of the agreeable lunch had a rather bad time because they shuffled around with embarrassment. So all I would say is, if anyone feels like going, I won't mind in the slightest, and the rest of you don't be embarrassed. Right, so we're going to do a bit of Roman Gloucester here, a sort of general run around, and I feel like a bit like a bad penny who keeps turning up on this topic. I guess what I want to try and do is talk a little bit about some of, as it were, the riches of the wonderful history that we have in Gloucester, but also to talk a bit, if you like, from my own point of view, which is as a researcher, because the whole point about Roman Gloucester is that it is very much an area where there's ongoing research, and research being done by the archaeological unit and by other individuals. So if we just bear that in mind, that's the sort of connecting theme for some somewhat disjointed remarks as they shall be. Now, could we have the lights and the slide projector? Let's start with Nerva. No, let's see if I can focus him. That might be too obvious, but never mind. This Nerva is this chap in his 60s. Now, this is a rather interesting portrait, which is on a beautiful slab, which is in the Vatican Museum in Rome, which I'll show you in a moment. It's quite an interesting piece, this, that it's a grand scene of the emperor setting off to war, and Nerva had just succeeded as emperor in 96. His predecessor was the bad guy Domitian. Now, the Romans had this habit of the official public art. They would just recut the head of the emperor, who would otherwise be in the same scene. Well, I mean, we've all been to those places, you know, where you dress up in, or you stand in front of a cowboy thing and you stick your head in and you get a photograph taken. This was very much the Roman approach, that the emperor was emperor, and when a new guy succeeded, you changed the portrait. So if you look closely at this, you can see that there's quite a sort of thin-faced, thin face, a man of 60's face is represented there, but on top of it is this curious ridge with a mop of rather thick, rich hair. Well, that was his predecessor, Domitian, a bad guy who had been done away in his late 30s, so was, here it is, so a beautiful scene, and so there is Nerva over there, you can see him, and the sort of Amazonian figure, the lady with the bare breasts and the helmet leading him, is a personification of Roma, the city of Rome. It's a bit like the personification of Britannia that we have on the, or we used to have on the coins years ago. All these ideas were invented by the Romans. So the scene is the emperor being ushered off to fight a glorious campaign. I mean, actually, is it rather naughty to think of George W. Bush? Maybe I shouldn't, but, you know, I mean, you could put George W. Bush's face there, perhaps. And on the left is Minerva putting on her helmet, and then the bearded man to the left of her is Mars, and on the very left-hand side of the picture you can see a wing. That's a wing of victory, because of course it goes without question that a glorious victory will await the emperor's campaign. And of course, it's any emperor, it happens to be Nerva, so this is one of the best portraits we have of Nerva. But in Gloucester, of course, we're a very long way away from imperial politics in the centre of Rome. And our distant echo of all of this is here in the Forum. I mean, this is the scene of the real, what we can call, well, not the real, but the original equestrian statue, whose base we see here in the photograph. Only some of the blocks of stone of the plinth are still in position, and surrounding it is paving of the courtyard of this forum. And I was describing this morning how it was a big courtyard area. It had colonnades on the side. At the top of the photograph there, you can see a gutter at the side and a rather shapeless mass of stone, which is a bit of a fallen column. So you must imagine a colonnade down there and a bit of a paved courtyard with this base. Now, the base was rebuilt in the 4th century, in late Roman times this was. It had once been very beautifully made. In that photograph it looked rather a manky mess. Of course, people in medieval times have come and taken the stones away, so it's only what survives. But it had already been rebuilt in Roman times. Around the foot of it was the fragments. I think there were about 30 fragments of cast bronze, unfortunately all cut up, the largest one of which is the jagged piece you see at the top. And these, of course, are on display in the City Museum. You can see them any day. And we can recognise that from this morning as being the fringe on the saddlecloth and other bits from this equestrian statue. And this is the model for that, and I suppose the model for the statue we have, in many ways, this wonderful gilt bronze statue of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius on his horse with his arm outstretched, much as Nerva is for us, and that used to stand in Michelangelo's Piazza, the Capitol in Rome, Piazza del Campidoglio, where it was moved as part of Michelangelo's scheme in the 16th century. The real statue is now indoors in the museum. It's been conserved and taken care of because, of course, it was eroding, it was corroding in the polluted atmosphere of Rome, and a copy is in its place. But there is the sort of archetypal emperor statue. Great. Here at Gloucester, the community is making its statement, well, we're part of the Roman scheme of things. But as we'll see, every such statement is different from every other such statement. I mean, but this is Pompeii, and we have an aerial view of the Forum, which you can see, the big colonnaded open space, and at the top is a temple to the Capitoline Triad. At the bottom, these buildings with the sort of apsidal ends on them are the civic buildings. The basilica, you can see going off on the left-hand side, so the Forum and Civic Centre at Pompeii, and remember Pompeii is destroyed in 79 by the eruption of Vesuvius, so this is a 1st century AD Forum, just a little bit, I mean nothing really earlier than what we're talking about, is a very nice civic centre, and you've probably noticed by now that if you go at the bottom of this long, oblong courtyard, there are, once again, some quite substantial bases of no doubt equestrian statues. Here we've leaped over to what in many ways is a sort of twin Roman city to Gloucester. I'm sure if they had twinning of cities in Roman times as we have now, I mean we're now twinned with Trier, Gloucester would have done well to twin itself with this place, which is Timgad in Algeria. Timgad was a military colony founded for soldiers of the 3rd Legion who were stationed at nearby Lambesis. And then the suggestion made, I assume it's a suggestion, there may be some inscriptional evidence, there may be some inscriptions which indicate it, is of charioteer groups on these very big bases. And there's another such stone, better preserved, found in the cathedral, which also lies across the defences, probably reused stone used in the cathedral, and that refers to a cohort of the 20th Legion. So these are the documents that tell us, actually documentation of military involvement in Gloucester. Meaning it's a type of pottery found up and down the Severn Valley, that's strictly correct, but there used to be a more chauvinistic way of describing this pottery, which I always rather liked. It was called Glevum-ware, the pottery of Gloucester. And if you look at his helmet, he has a cheek piece to the helmet that's protecting his cheek of a similar shape to that one with Jupiter from Kingsholm. The Kingsholm one seems to have been in an actual workshop situation. It wasn't actually used, it was being adapted for use. This is a pit which has the hind legs of a horse in it. So the way this was interpreted as we did the excavation was this was the abandonment of the military site. They dug some pits, they put the disused pottery, there were a whole lot of pottery vessels in these pits as well, sometimes in sets of similar vessels of different sizes, and, well, I don't know if these were unused meat joints or the hind legs of a draft animal. So, you could explain it. Eventually, the limits of the fortress had a stone wall built round them. Now, it's in this respect that Roman Gloucester is virtually unique in Roman Britain, in one being such an important city, a colonia, two having such a tiny walled area, but three, its walled area being such a small proportion of the whole of the city of Roman Gloucester, because as this is from Eastgate Street opposite here again, and here is the gravelled surface of the street, and there's a little irregular groove, and that is the channel for a water pipe, and at intervals along it there are iron columns
Henry has said that he'll field some questions, so if anybody would like to start the batting.
Because Gloucester was founded by Nerva, Nerva actually came to Britain during his military service.
I think that to get into the Roman Senate, you didn't have to go into the Roman army to get into the Roman Senate. To get into the Roman Senate.
What I'd like to do is ask Barbara from the audience to come up to the stage and give our thanks to Henry for a very, very interesting talk.
Etc. And as for going to sleep, I certainly heard no snores. I don't really think anybody did. Put your hands up if you did. We show our appreciation in the usual way.
Since the unveiling ceremony, an additional information plaque has been donated in memory of Brian Charland Tate, a former Trust chairman. The Gloucester Emperor Nerva statue is now admired as an asset that Gloucester Civic Trust and the supporters of the Millennium Project can justly be proud of.